successful journey possible.
So interesting, Courtney, he starts with Russia there, ends on our allies, the Kurds. We also got a tweet from General Mazloum just a couple of hours or so ago. And in this tweet, he said this: for 5 months, there has been joint intel cooperation on the ground and accurate monitoring until we achieved a joint operation to kill Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. What are you hearing from your sources on the ground there and overseas from with regards to what we just heard from the president?
So we know that as far as Turkey and Russia were involved, what we know specifically is that Turkey, some of the U.S. Aircraft flew over Turkish airspace. For Russia, they also flew over Russian airspace, Russian-held areas inside Syria. The U.S. military has this deconfliction mechanism that they've had in place for several years now with Russia, where they maintain their own airspace, their own areas that they control in the air, but they work together to ensure, they call it deconfliction. They work together to ensure that there's no miscommunications, there's no accidental one aircraft from one military straying into another one. So we know Russia was involved in that. You mentioned the tweet from General Mazloum, who's the head of the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Kurdish-led Syrian opposition group. He said specifically that this was months in the making. That may be the case. We don't know that from U.S. military officials. What we do know is that this is some intelligence that became actionable in just about mid-October is the timeline we've gotten, just over a week before the actual raid yesterday. So that was when these elite special operators came to the country. We know at least some of them launched out of right here in Erbil and flew to northwestern Syria from here for the raid. They spent the last week plus refining their plans, making sure that they had all the best and latest intelligence before they went through with the raid. So if in fact there have been several nations, frankly, who have been taking some credit for this raid, the Iraqi military, the Iraqi government is also saying that they were involved in providing some original intelligence to the U.S. They are saying that the timeline was back in September. So from the U.S., we don't have any of that confirmed, but there may have been a whole group, sort of a potpourri of intelligence that came in here that led to what ultimately became the actionable information that led to the raid, Yasmin.
Yeah, I think you're referring to this from some Iraqi officials back in September arresting relatives of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in northern Iraq in the Mosul area. That included a wife and a courier, and Iraqi intelligence saying the interrogation of these individuals helped identify the coordinates of Abu Bakr's safe house, which means they would have known since September where he was. But it would be interesting to me, Courtney, considering that he is very much a wanted man, that he would stay in that exact same location in northwest Iraq, knowing that the Americans were tracking his every move.
And that's one of the big questions. President Trump kind of danced around that a little bit, saying that, they were expecting him to move, but then he didn't, and the U.S. kept thinking Baghdadi was going to move from one location and didn't move. So we don't have any fidelity on that. That's one of the many questions that we're continuing to try to ask and get answers to here. There have been a number of reports over the past 2 years or so that Baghdadi's been injured. One of them was, in fact, that he wasn't able to move for several months at a time. You mentioned the Iraqi intelligence report. I think that it was Reuters who reported that first. That specifically said that Baghdadi had been at that safe house for about 2 months, according to the information that they gained, which, if that's true, I mean, that's fascinating. It reminds me right back to the Abbottabad raid in 2011, where we all had this notion that bin Laden was hiding in complexes of caves and series of working with series of couriers throughout the Fatah in Pakistan, when it turns out he'd been living in a compound in Abbottabad right near the Pakistani military academy. So, that's one of the many questions that we have. We don't really know how long Baghdadi had been there. It does seem that this location was some sort of a safe house, and the U.S. military officials are confirming that after they finished this hours-long raid, spent...
Oh, it seems as if we've lost Courtney, but if we get her back, we will bring her to you. Want to go now to Mardin, Turkey. Erin McLaughlin is joining me now from their NBC News correspondent. Erin, thanks for joining us from Turkey. Appreciate it. One of the countries thanked by the president in his 50-minute or so speech. Talk me through what you were hearing from your perspective.
Yeah, well, watching that press conference was truly remarkable. The level of detail the president went into in that press conference was perhaps unprecedented, especially from a Middle Eastern perspective. Rarely do you hear a leader in this region express what exactly happened in the context of an intelligence operation with that level of candor. And the images and the visuals that President Trump provided during that press conference will be truly shocking to many in the Middle East. The idea of Baghdadi running from U.S. forces under the cover of darkness, landing at the compound, blasting down the walls of the compound, chasing him into a tunnel, Baghdadi grabbing 3 of his children, running into a dead end, being chased by dogs before killing himself, is something that people in this region will absolutely find truly shocking. They'll also most likely be shocked at a U.S. president thanking Russia, thanking Turkey, thanking Iraq, thanking the Kurdish SDF in the same sentence. That is very, very unusual, especially considering the conflict that we've seen here for the past 2 weeks. Now, we have heard some additional reaction from the Kurdish SDF in a statement saying that they did provide intelligence to the United States to help in this operation, also alleging that the operation was delayed due to Turkey's incursion into Syria. And there's also questions outstanding for Turkey as well, especially when you consider that Baghdadi was killed in Idlib province, some 3 miles away from the border, raising a lot of eyebrows as to how someone like Baghdadi could have been hiding out in an environment that was hostile to ISIS. Keep in mind that the groups operating in Idlib are no friends of ISIS, but the president in that press conference clarifying that, saying that he believed that Baghdadi was in Idlib province to try and strengthen ISIS, to try and get ISIS to have a stronghold in the province, but nevertheless, again, 3 miles from the Turkish border. Lots of questions.
Yeah, a lot of questions. It's interesting that you bring that part up. I also just want to mention quickly, Senator Lindsey Graham is going to be appearing in the White House briefing room, so we're going to bring you that as soon as he comes up. But Aaron, you bring up the point of the fact that ISIS, or that Baghdadi was in northwest Syria, and that's where he was captured. The president mentioning the fact that he was there to try and rebuild ISIS, but we had our own Richard Engel who was basically saying no, in fact, he was in that region possibly to try and escape to Turkey, to flee the area. What are you hearing with regards to this discrepancy in what our reporting is indicating and what many people on the ground are saying versus what the president said this morning?
I mean, the president saying that he was there to try and rebuild ISIS, possibly, but the bottom line is we just don't know how he could have gotten into that region. Remember, you know, speaking to many analysts familiar with this area, he is most comfortable in Iraq. They had long thought that Baghdadi was located in the border regions between Syria and Iraq. He is Iraqi. That's where he has his networks. That's where he'd be able to hide. That's where he'd be able to most comfortably operate. So to suddenly find him 3 miles from Turkey, you know, raises all sorts of questions. It's unclear exactly what he was doing there.
But does it seem realistic to you that Baghdadi would be trying to rebuild ISIS in an area that is not at all friendly to him or what he is trying to achieve?
I mean, that's people are asking. We're going to have to get more information, essentially, to figure out what exactly he was doing in Idlib province, how exactly he got there. We last heard from him in a video in April in which he seemed to be turning ISIS outward. It was a month after the defeat of his so-called caliphate. His last stronghold was gone at the hands of Syrian Kurdish forces and U.S. forces. He then released a video in April of him sitting down and basically saying that he was taking ISIS global to other countries such as the DRC, such as Sri Lanka, that was going to be his focus, as well as focusing on other parts of the Middle East. I think his long-term strategy remains to be seen. I also think it's worth noting that we have yet to hear any official reaction from the ISIS propaganda machine, which we know is vocal on his death. We have heard from some ISIS sympathizers on channels such as Telegram, places places they're known to frequent. And they're basically saying that even if he is confirmed dead, they're going to continue on with the ISIS project just in the way that al-Qaeda continued on following the death of Osama bin Laden.
What do you make of the president, Aaron, saying that they've identified the next leaders of ISIS?
I mean, that's entirely possible. Analysts I've been speaking to in the region tell me that ISIS would have a succession plan in place, given the fact that there was an intelligence leak within ISIS to the point where the United States was able to track him down into a tunnel, provoking him to detonate a suicide vest. Suggests that the United States has a lot of intelligence, actionable intelligence on ISIS, its inner workings, how it operates. So it would make complete sense that they would also have a general idea of who would be his successor. And those plans would undoubtedly be in place because of who Baghdadi is and the likelihood that this could potentially have happened to him, that he would be killed in some sort of operation.
Yeah, but nonetheless, as we saw with al-Qaeda, just because you kill the leader of an organization does not mean the organization is then dead. They very much continue on. Aaron McLaughlin, appreciate your reporting on this so much. Thank you. I want to go now to NBC News military analyst Colonel Jack Jacobs. Colonel, thanks for talking to us on this. I first want to get your reaction, really, to what we heard from the president from the White House just earlier.
Well, I'll reiterate things that other people said because it's worth noting, and that is there was an unprecedented level of detail. Some of it may even be classified at one point, dispensed to everybody. And shortly after the action, I've never heard that level of, you see that kind of thing in an after-action report. One aside, the president said that that Baghdadi was the founder of ISIS. That's not correct. It was al-Zarqawi. But it also brings up the point about succession. We've killed a succession of leaders, deputy leaders, second and third in command of ISIS and other terrorist organizations, and they carry on. What's made ISIS different is the decision to go to a terrain-based model. That is, they wanted a caliphate, which they would rule, actual terrain. And they took over large swaths of Syria. The problem with that is that if you are an organization like ISIS, that's not inherently terrain-based, that puts you at tremendous risk from your adversaries like the United States and others who can very easily take the terrain back. And to the extent that ISIS has changed dramatically into something else that is just a terrorist organization now, it was as a result of the decision to become a caliphate and therefore to defend terrain, which they couldn't possibly do. Yasmin.
Let's talk. There's a couple things I want to cover with you. I want to talk about the significance of the killing of Baghdadi, what that does to an organization like ISIS that has already been weakened, and we have reported over and over again it is not completely obliterated, despite the fact the president says it is. So I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about some of the details of the raid and what the president laid out for us. Let's first touch on the significance of the killing here of Baghdadi and what that does to ISIS.
Well, we don't know what his plans were. It strongly suggests he was trying to escape, as Richard said, because he would be doing other things and would be elsewhere if he's trying to rebuild it. So his assertion earlier, Baghdadi's, that what he wanted to do was take the fight to other countries and therefore become another terrorist organization, that makes a great deal of sense, and I think that was his plans, and destroying him makes it extremely difficult for them to operate it multilaterally in a wide variety of places, to coordinate activities in a wide variety of places. Whoever is going to take over, and undoubtedly they have somebody to take over, there's a series of people who might take over, whoever it is has got a big job ahead of them. And when you destroy a leader of an organization like this, it becomes fragmented. It becomes more difficult to deter them from doing things, but it becomes much easier to take them out bit by bit. So this is a very big deal, getting rid of this guy. We'll see what happens over the next few months or so, but I suspect we're going to see terrorist operations in number of different countries where they can apply.
Well,
You wanted to talk about how,
Yeah, no, but I wonder here if this type of killing only reinforces the ideology of Baghdadi's followers, and in fact strengthens it.
Well, it doesn't make it any easier for those of us who want to destroy the organization completely.
All right,
those people.
Colonel, let's take a listen to Senator Lindsey Graham. We'll come back to you in just a second.
Announcing what happened. And he said, why don't you come to the White House? And I said, I'd love to come, and I'm honored to be here on this day that really does matter, I think, to the world, not just the United States. And trying to put in words what does it matter, how to explain it. I think last night the best of America confronted the worst of mankind, and the good guys won. The good guys and the good gals won. The dog, trying to find out the name of the dog. Pray for the dog. It was severely injured, but it just reminds me of the team concept of the military. I've been talking to the president for months about the war on terror, and every time I would bring up the topic, he would tell me without any hesitation, I'm going to get that blank guy. And I can't use the word on television, but the president's been determined for a very long time to bring Baghdadi to justice. And I want to compliment him and his team for bringing about a result that I think is a game changer in the war on terror. The war is by no means over. The caliphate is dead, and the leader of the caliphate is dead. And that's a big deal. When bin Laden was killed, that was a big deal. And I complimented President Obama. That was a hard call he made, to go into Pakistan and kill bin Laden. What the president did last night was a hard call. These things are not predetermined to go well. And it just tells you how good our people are. And what the president said today was very reassuring to me, that when it comes to ISIS and other terrorist groups, we're coming after you wherever you go, as long as it takes to protect our country, our way of life. I just end on this. ISIS is a depraved organization that's ever existed in the history of the world. They are religious Nazis. They cannot be accommodated. They cannot be negotiated with. They have to be destroyed and marginalized. And here's the good news for all of us. Very few people over there buy into what these crazy people are selling. And it will always be in our interest, I believe, to partner with people over there who are on the front lines to make sure that ISIS types never come here, and that we replace this ideology with something more sustainable. To the American people, this has been a long, difficult war. And I understand what the president wants to do. He wants to reduce our footprint and lower our cost. And he's right to want to do that. But I'm very encouraged by what I see in Syria. Maybe a new strategy that focuses on building up the lives of people in the region, having a small footprint of Americans led by the local populations, and securing the oil is a really smart idea, quite frankly. That's how ISIS survived for so long. But you can take Syrian oil out of the hands of ISIS, Iran, and other enemies and put it into the hands of the Kurds and people who fought and died along our side. And that is a really transformational event in the Iraq-Syrian theater. And what I see developing in Syria is very promising.
Senator Graham. You just said that the war is by no means over. Do you think that the president understands that? And also, do you think that the U.S. could have pulled off this operation without the troop presence that the U.S. has had in Syria for some time now? And are you concerned still about the withdrawal of most of those troops from Syria?
Well, when it comes to what's happening in Syria, I like what I see. We've had the president's position and my position is really not that far off. We really don't need a bunch of Americans in the safe zone. The international community should do that. But some American forces deployed with the SDF to make sure the oil does not ever fall back in the hands of ISIS, and Iran's not the biggest winner, makes a lot of sense. When it comes to terrorism, the president changed the rules of engagement You think the caliphate destroyed itself? He made a conscious decision when he went to Iraq to change the game when it came to destroying ISIS. He's had a determination to destroy the caliphate unlike anybody I've ever met. Now the question is how to keep it down. I think we got a plan now to keep it down that meets his national security objectives of reducing our footprint and having others do more.
Questions for you, sir, if you don't mind. And I want to lay these out separately. The president, in his remarks, mentioned Turkey's cooperation when it came to this operation, and I'm wondering if that changes your view on sanctions. I also want to ask, well, the president called you. We understand he did not call other members of the Gang of Eight, even after the operation had concluded. Was that a mistake?
I don't know who he's calling family members right now. I was in town, so, I was right down the street.
Did you say calling family members?
He's calling some family members now who've been victims of ISIS. And
the Foley's, perhaps.
And I guess what I would say today is that what I see happening in Syria makes sense to me, that the president destroyed the caliphate. He's asking others to do more, and he's right when it comes to Turkey. I think the invasion has been disrupted, but at the end of the day, if we can continue to partner with the Kurds, secure the oil revenues for their sake, not Iran's sake, not for ISIS' sake, help pay the cost of the operations makes eminent sense to me. And I think the president is right to say that the conflict between Syrian Kurds and Turkey needs to be resolved. The safe zone needs to be occupied by forces other than the United States. I agree with that.
Senator, it's no secret that the president wanted to pull out of Syria last year. Without our troop presence there, would an operation like this have been possible?
You could probably have done this from Iraq, to be honest with you. I don't know exactly the details of the operation, but I think the president is focusing on the resources that made ISIS so strong for so long. The caliphate was funded basically by many sources of revenue, but one of the chief sources of revenue was Syrian oil. So if you take that off the table, the terrorists in the region or in the world are hurt, and Iran containment makes sense. The Iranians would love to get this oil. The Russians have shown some desire to go down here. And I can't say this now, but I was in the Situation Room, and I'll talk to you later on. The president made some pretty firm statements to people in the region that you come into this area at your own peril.
Senator, you very recently said you thought that the president's decision to withdraw could be the biggest mistake of his presidency. Today, you're affirming it as a positive one.
What I'm saying today is that the killing of Baghdadi is a game changer in the war on terror. Doesn't mean the war is over. The president's determination over time has paid off. We don't give him enough credit for destroying the caliphate. He did this in months, not years, because he changed the rules of engagement. So what I want to talk about today is those brave men and women who planned the operation, who went in on the ground and killed this bastard.
Senator, two questions. First, is it appropriate for the president only to inform Republicans of this operation, which departs from tradition?
I don't know. That's not my concern today. My concern today is that we did a good thing.
Okay, and then second on the oil. By what warrant or legal right in international law does the United States take the oil of the sovereign nation of Syria?
Well, what you don't understand is that these oil fields are in areas where this SDF operates. This was the chief source of revenue for a long time for ISIS. It is now in the hands of the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are Arab and Kurds, mostly Kurds, with a partnership with the United States. So, no, this doesn't violate any law. In my view, what it does is just good, common sense foreign policy. I want to congratulate the president for making sure that the oil revenues never fall into the hands of the bad guys. And the way you secure this is a win-win. The SDF will get more money if we can modernize the oil fields. We're not going over there to enrich America. We're over there to help our allies deny our enemy resources that will allow them to get stronger over time. And finally, and this is okay, to lower the cost to us. The president mentioned something. I had a bill that would make our aid to Iraq a loan that could be forgiven but also paid back over time. Here's the one thing that's been missing in the Mideast: skin in the game. If we had made our aid to Iraq alone, they would have probably acted differently than if it's just a grant. Now the SDF, who have been good partners, have a chance with our help to increase revenue for the benefit of their people. They'll have more incentive to fight harder. Everything changes when the people you're fighting with have skin in the game. And I want to compliment the president for coming up with a model in Syria that we probably should have done in Iraq. This is a game changer with the killing of Baghdadi. This is a moment where we should all be proud of our American military and our intelligence community. This is a moment where President Trump's worst critics should say, well done, Mr. President.
Senator Graham, thank you.